Hi, everybody. This is day 1043. 1043 days since Richard vanished from the barracks there at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. Wow, a lot of news going on, and the big one before I get into conspiracy of forced disappearance and murder and what that means. Let's talk about. Um, let's see, I have some notes here because it's so important. Here you go. Can everyone hear me? Let me make sure that everything's working right. If someone can give me a thumbs up, that would be great. It's getting very, very important now to stay focused. Absolutely. It's getting very important because the real it's like it's going, but it's not really. Is it? Okay, there it is. Okay. So we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes because at this point, 1043 days, we um, presume Richard to be dead. With everything that we have collected over 1,000 days, we have forensic evidence, we have hard facts that lead us to the conclusion that Richard has been murdered, that Richard was forcibly disappeared, right? And I'm going to get into that conversation. And how can something like this happen to a U.S. Army soldier? How can we have these types of crimes being committed like the Vanessa Guillen? Richard is the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier. That's very, very clear. We're calling him the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier because he was designated on the 25th of November 2020 as the very first CONUS DES 1 missing soldier under the new Vanessa Guillen absent soldier flowchart. That's kind of a mouthful. I've said it enough times that it kind of rolls easily, but for other people that don't know what CONUS means, which is Continental USA, and DES 1, duty status whereabouts unknown, that don't know these acronyms, we want to make it very clear what is Richard's designation, the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier. Now that has also come into question because of these autopsy reports that were led to us and revealed to us. And, you know, the yellow Interpol, that is also something I want to talk about, that had this designation um, of died while missing, right? Died while missing, and I looked that up, and you don't have to present a body with that designation. And all of this is very, very important because we're talking about the legal world here. So we're in the military world, we're in the legal world, and what is the normal protocol for a soldier that goes missing? And in our son's case, that protocol has not been followed at all. At all. It has not been followed. And from the very beginning. And so someone, and I'm talking about within the CID, within the FBI, in the meetings, the staged meetings, the staged task force, no op board. I mean, no protocol has been to come to a meeting out of uniform. When you're talking about hosting 15 plus agencies and the U.S. Army comes out of uniform without an op board, without an operational order, um, so the protocols have not been followed at all in our son's case. That means that somebody in a position of authority has been saying to the law enforcement agencies, do not follow protocol when it comes to Richard Halliday. That's absolutely what we have experienced, is that someone is leading this to not follow protocol, which means they're covering up. And they're doing that now. Um, and I really want to stress this, that they have that kind of power not to follow protocol, and that our leadership, our 44 four-star generals, just as an example, because there's a lot more leaders, right? We have a lot more leaders. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar government system here that we have. Unfortunately, we um, have just grown used to uh, creating our economy out of debt, right? Trying to create an economy and create debt coming, having the government borrow the money and putting it at the feet of our children, of our future, and then creating more and more agencies, more and more. We have to have this. We have this crisis. We have to have this government, this government, this government. Crisis after crisis after crisis. They are pros at creating crises and then answers to the crisis. It's a broken window fallacy, right? It's a broken window fallacy that I've been talking about for so long. And so we have this multi-trillion-dollar government, and somewhere, somehow, they're not following protocol, and they don't want to follow protocol. And we saw that with the barracks, the simple barracks there at Fort Bliss. Um, there is no protocol being followed because I just have it right in front of me. Yesterday, it was in the newspaper that a Carlos Herberto, right? I think I'm saying his name right. Richard Walsh was arrested. He was a soldier right there. Guess where he was living? He was living, this is what I've been told. Now, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But this is what I have been told, okay, by very good sources, is that Walsh, Carlos Herberto, Richard Walsh, was living in the barracks, there at Fort Bliss. And for months, he was sharing his bed with a 14-year-old living in the barracks with him. Okay? Wowzer, what is going on? And I said, I've been asking these years, whose bright idea was to make the barracks co-ed? Look, the barracks are co-ed. The military is predominantly male. Okay? You have 9 at the minimum. This is a minimum. Sometimes you have 500. 9 males to 1 female. And you're going to make the barracks co-ed and put into danger our females that volunteer to serve our country, serve in our military, you're going to put them in danger by sticking them in a barracks that's co-ed, 9 to 1, 9 to 1. And so many of these uh, young volunteer soldiers that come in, so many of them, I'm sorry, I've realized this, they have records. Okay, so maybe they want a new life or whatever. And this is nothing new in history to have those that are serving in the Navy and the armed forces and that to have records when they come in, that they're escaping a bad family life, they're escaping, you know, maybe they're coming in because they didn't have a choice. It's like go to jail or join the army, something like this. So it's no, my problem is that the SOPs for the barracks, we have very, very strict SOPs, standard operating procedures for the barracks. And the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, they are supposed to, the NCOs, make sure that the barracks are running smoothly, that they are following the standard operating procedures. This Command Sergeant Major Jakovitz, he's retired now, but he was telling us that they were bringing girls in, young girls, right, during the COVID lockdown for these parties. And, we were being told by all these soldiers, oh, yeah, we were just drunk all the time. We were having a frat party every day. They're bringing girls in there. And then we're being told by the general that those barracks were flush with weapons. And then the CID, calls us out. It wasn't just Richard's barracks that had, flush with weapons. It was all the barracks on Fort Bliss. And we're like, okay, does that make that better? That doesn't make it better. That's saying that there is a systemic problem. And of course, we know there's a systemic problem because of Caleb Smither, because of Vanessa Guillen, because of Austin Hawk, because of Enrique Roman Martinez. I mean, we had April, May, June beheadings by our own, to our own. With leadership like this, who needs enemies, right? Who needs enemies? And now we have a 14-year-old girl living in the barracks for, at minimum, 9 to 1, 9 males to 1. And she's getting sexually abused? Duh. These leaders, they need to be stripped of their uniforms, stripped of their designations and titles, stripped of their ranks, their stripes, their stars. You have a 14-year-old girl for months living in the barracks getting sexually abused. Richard told us, Mom, it's just so bad. It's so bad. I'll talk about anything, but I won't talk about the Army. It's so bad. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Richard was like, it's so bad. I can't talk about the Army. I can tell you this. I don't want to go green to gold. Don't ask me. I don't want to be an NCO. Don't ask me. I want to get out. Okay, so this comes from Richard, our son, who distinguished honor graduate from basic training, his cycle in basic training, and his cycle in advanced individual training. He was on top. He was a distinguished honor graduate. And he goes to his, all so was, an aspiring soldier, wanting to help, wanting to serve, wanting to earn the money, of course. I'm not going to lie to anybody. But he has good character and wanting to help, aspiring, And if you would just talk to the people that he was involved with, that's what they told us too. Except for when he became a whistleblower. When he said, okay, that's enough. Leilani Hart, who has a son, First Lieutenant Dallas Hart, up to no good. Up to no good. All across is up to no good. First Lieutenant Micah Brown, up to no good. First Sergeant Jay Paulin, up to no good. First Sergeant Michael Ruggiero, up to no good. Captain David Park, a West Pointer, up to no good. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Roddick, up to no good. I mean, he was relieved of his duty from lack of confidence. You have Clem Cower. Well, you have Dauber, Colonel Dauber. I haven't even mentioned him. Up to no good. Up to no good. Was it for the money? Was it because he was good at manipulating the books? Were they misappropriating money? Or more? I think it's more. I think it's a lot more. And if they're going to allow a 14-year-old girl to live in the barracks for months, being sexually abused, sexually assaulted, who knows what kind of drugs were there, right? Because we know the barracks are a marketplace for illegal drugs and, even legal drugs. We know that they have parties. We know that, and I'm not talking about nice parties. I'm not talking about playing musical chairs. You bring in girls and, to have the frat party in the middle of COVID, and, they weren't playing musical chairs. So, and I don't think Command Sergeant Major Jakovitz was chaperoning, sitting in a chair chaperoning. I don't think that was the case. So if they're going to allow that kind of violation of the standard operating procedures that put so many lives in danger, then of course, what are they doing on top? What are they doing in the leadership? What was Lieutenant Colonel Roddick doing? What was Major General Clem Cower doing? What was Colonel Dauber doing? Right? I mean, what were they doing? Because they sure didn't have Richard Six when Tavita Nusa, when Richard became a whistleblower, and he went to the Child Protective Services, and Leilani Hart, and he was assigned to Vita Nusa to be on his case. That would give access to his files. That was allowed by Special Agent Soto, Special Agent in Charge Soto. And Richard was illegally exposed. We know that because of the complaint that was made by the officer of the court that Leilani Hart had illegal access to CID files. She had access to them. Who would want to do something like that, right? Who would want to see what Richard complained about, why the IG were all over the barracks, and then in June, that's our timeline, that Richard made CID complaints. And it didn't make people happy. But you have Leilani Hart accessing illegally Richard's file and then using that, we were told by a very, very good source, to fortify a complaint on her family. And what was in that complaint? The constant, well, look, a 7-year-old was raped in Leilani Hart's master bedroom. And it took 2 years to put in that complaint. And it was multiple members of the household. That's what this complaint says by Leilani Hart, and she had it notarized, and we talked to the notary. He had it in his hands. He had that complaint in his hands. He confirmed that complaint was notarized on the 22nd of June, the day before, July, the day before Richard went missing, 23rd of July, 2020. Now, that's serious, and it gets worse because there was child porn for long periods of time being in that CID, which we have the file number. And Richard was complaining about this stuff to the CPS. He had sex videos he turned in. He pulled on a string. And I'm not even done yet, because in that CID complaint by Leilani Hart, she reports that her first lieutenant son, Dallas Hart, was engaged in an incestual relationship with his brother while he was in uniform. Now, when those complaints came out, when that information came out, then there was, interesting enough, and I wrote it down in my notes, there's so many notes. Okay. Tavita Nusa lost his badge. He was a special agent in the CID. That is a conflict of interest. Do you think that special agent in charge, Soto, told us that special agent Tavita Nusa lost his badge, that there was a conflict of interest? He was separated in June 2020 from my records. If I'm wrong, please let me know. And August 22nd, I know July was the last time for Dallas, but it's probably because he had 30 days of leave. But he was separated forcefully, unwillingly separated. Maybe he was willing. I don't know. From the Army in August of 2022. So they're no longer in the military. So we know that is suspicious. We have forensic evidence. We have this evidence, and that is so suspicious, right? And then we have more. we have information coming in, and we have now the lack of a warrant in Sarasota, Florida, to search our home, to say, "Oh, we're here to arrest Richard." There, we have these autopsies that say he's died while missing, and then a yellow Interpol, which means he's just missing. There's no intent to find him. See, a yellow Interpol, even though it's been a real blessing because it proves that there were no charges against Richard, not even a desertion charge. Because, see, if there was a desertion charge, then it would be a red Interpol. But because there's no desertion charge, and this happened, people will say, "Oh, that's because he was designated the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier." But no, that didn't happen until November 25th. And the yellow Interpol went in the 2nd of September. So, there was no desertion. This is very interesting, because if it was a desertion, and then we have, and we filed a complaint. We filed a complaint about military police specialist Anthony Swafford, because we have this interference in our son's investigation. And that interference was the unjust smearing of Richard. And Anthony Swafford messed up. And the thing is that there was a purposeful collaborate. I shouldn't say it that way. There was a deliberate smearing of Richard to sabotage the search for Richard inside the law enforcement agencies. To the law enforcement agencies, they were targeted. You see, the military police specialist Anthony Swafford, he was targeted. I said they did a hypnosis on him. They did a psychological operation on him. He fell for it. They should be trained not to. They should be trained to stand firm on the Constitution, that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And he did not do that. He messed up. He messed up bad. Along with many, many other law enforcement officers. They messed up because they needed to look for Richard. And for somehow they believed whoever, so this must be a pretty powerful person. Is it Special Agent Soto? We want to know. Is he that powerful? Or who was doing this deliberate smear tactic to targeting the law enforcement agencies, the law enforcement community, saying, do not go near Richard Halliday's case. Do not investigate Richard Halliday's case. From all kinds of smears. I think the funniest smear is that Richard was counterfeiting money. I think that's like the most idiotic smear, and people believed it. And Special Agent Soto called, and he was like, "Did you know that Richard had fake money?" And I said, "Are you talking about prop money, Hollywood money, for motion picture use only?" I mean, they're stamped on the back, big as Dallas, for motion picture use only. Motion picture use only, right? And I said, yes. Richard liked promotion. He liked prop money. Just like some people like toy cars, or they like zirconian fake diamonds, or they like a fake Rolex. And you saw him using it as a prop in his video where he was burning it, and he said he was sending us a message. And I said that at the very beginning. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, he's sending us a message. He's burning his prop money. And he's saying, I'd rather burn my money than spend it on whores and blow. So that means the barracks, that means El Paso, Fort Bliss was full of whores and blow. I didn't even know what blow was, but that's illegal drugs. And there is a big problem with prostitution. He sent a message, and now I know. I didn't know then. I know now. Because I actually thought that our NCOs, non-commissioned officers, that our, commanders would want to keep our soldiers safe, secure, healthy, disciplined. Disciplined, a time for all things. There's a time for all things. Not every day is a party. Not every day is a time for your sex cult. Not every day in the barracks, a time and a place for everything. The barracks is not a time and a place to keep a 14-year-old girl that you are sexually abusing, that you are sexually assaulting for months. Is there ever a time for that? No. I want to make that clear. And that's how undisciplined that we have gotten, that we have to make sure people understand that it's not tolerated at all. It's not understood anymore that that's not tolerated, because for months it was tolerated. Don't tell me nobody knew that a 14-year-old girl in the barracks was living there, using the facilities, probably eating at the dining hall, and nothing was done. And she was being sexually assaulted. Come on. And so Richard was a whistleblower, and if there are problems with the NCOs, they are given the green flag to do this stuff. They're allowed to ignore the standard operating procedures. You see, they're not being held accountable for violating the standard operating procedures. This is a command problem. And that command there at Fort Bliss has a problem because they have General McConville as their oversight of their, as their commander. And oh my gosh, General McConville, he's a total criminal. He needs to be stripped from his uniform, stripped of his stars, stripped of his title. He needs to be charged and arrested. The number of crimes he has committed is so long. There's not a doubt in my mind that what I'm saying needs to be done for the well-being of all of our volunteer sons and daughters that serve, so all of our service members and the family members of our service members. And not only that, for every taxpayer, because you understand that they are funneling the money. They are misappropriating the money. They are stealing items and selling them over the borders. We saw that with Millie very clearly, that he left all the items there in Afghanistan. He wasn't willing to bring them home. Why? Because they were unaccounted for, I'm sure. And he left our Advantage Technology, which is our night vision goggles. He left that there in Afghanistan. That was an advantage that the United States had, and he left it there. I wonder why. I wonder because the books are so messy. They're not keeping record of our supplies, of our weapons, of our equipment. And the books are fuzzy. And we have caught many selling these items. And so if they're going to get away with that, I'm sure for decades, there's been fraud, waste, and abuse. And they laugh at us because they go, fraud, waste, and abuse, see something, say something. Fraud, waste, and abuse, see something, say something. I can't tell you how many years. Rob's been out of the Army since 2006. Okay? And I remember it clearly all the time, and they laughed. And I knew at that time there was fraud, waste, and abuse. I didn't know what extent. But these wars seem to be an opportunity for fraud, waste, and abuse. And that sounds little, but we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar government, and we are getting more and more in debt. You saw it. They just are out of control with this theft, the theft of our country. They're stripping it bare. We have a, out of control government right now. They've been out of control for a long time. And this hurts so many and puts pressure on people. They're under pressure. And pressure is not nice. It makes not nice people. And then we have more crimes. We have something else in the news that serves its purpose. Cleveland police chief reveals that in 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, they have 30 children kidnapped. So 2 a day? That's not normal, y'all. That's not normal. So all of this theft, all of this criminal syndicate activity, it's a domino effect. It's the real, if, I don't really believe in viruses, and I've gotten hit back, the germ theory is trash. I said that for a long time during the whole COVID. And, you might not agree with me. That's fine. But I have the right to believe a different kind of science, I guess. I have the right to question the germ theory because Pasteur did. He recanted his whole germ theory on his deathbed. Thank God for homeschooling, because I wouldn't have known that unless I was homeschooling and I was reading through it, trying to teach my children. So I lost my train of thought, but you have to question things. You can't just listen to whatever is going on and accept it. And that's where Anthony Swafford messed up. He didn't say, well, wait a minute, this is a missing soldier. Well, wait a minute, this is a missing soldier. We need to find him no matter what. He's one of ours. He's one of ours. We need to find him. And so the whole training, the whole atmosphere from the top is so dirty. The top is so corrupt that it's seeping downward, right? It's polluting. Yeah, I use that quite a bit. We have this pollution going on, and it's harming our economy, but most importantly, our most valuable assets. And that's our volunteer sons and daughters, our future. our future, our national security. Without them, we have no national security. Volunteering, and it seems like they really have been trying to get everyone that wants to aspire. Either they retaliate so hard that they throw them out, or they suicide them, and I think they wanted to suicide Richard by all the information that we have. I think that they were trying to um, do a psychological operation on him that was so severe that they would train him to suicide. And Elder Fernandez's mother, because she believes that, and I don't want to really speak for her, but she told me they trained to suicide, referring, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she believes that her son was targeted. And I believe that Richard was targeted too, to be suicided. And he was too strong in his mental capacity, and his mental in his joy of his salvation. That's what I always called it with him. His joy, the joy of your salvation. It's kind of like John Knox, and I mentioned that early on in some of my live streams, that John Knox was so sure and joyful of his salvation and the glory of God, that even being on a French galley ship, which is the worst of the worst of the worst, he did not fold. He survived, I think, over 18 months on that French galley ship, singing, singing, singing. Whistle while you're working. And, and in your spot, you had to, that was it. That was your spot. You couldn't just raise your hand and say, I have to go to the bathroom now. So it was hell on that French galley ship, but, he was victorious. He drove the captain crazy. It's a great piece of history to read, to, get a little bit encouragement. Light your candle. I just read a little, I think it's right here in this book. But yeah, you need to get that encouragement day in and day out. And definitely you need to read about good people that have overcome things, the worst type of tragedies. And of course, I have Theodora behind me, but I have my mother, I have my grandmother, I have my whole family, all the things that they went through, being German, being in Pirmasens, Germany, right on the French border, totally bombed to smithereens, and overcoming, losing family members, being on the losing side of a war, financially losing, and overcoming in a way that you maintain your honor, where you maintain your integrity, where you maintain the respect for God and God for you. So I think that's helped get us through very tough times too. And I think that's what Richard did through this. He remembered those lessons. And because I know that he was telling me, Mom, I can't go anywhere because I'll get in trouble. And I'm like, what do you mean you'll get in trouble? The fear in all of these soldiers that want to do right, they were being retaliated against. And especially in 2020 and 2021, they were being so targeted if they weren't, if they had questions about the unlawful orders that were given at that time. And there were lots of them. And maybe they didn't want to be used as a guinea pig, an experimental guinea pig, and maybe they didn't want to insert dead baby fetuses parts in their body, and they were being retaliated against. And Richard, being in a unit where there was whoring and illegal drugs and um, knowledge of this Hart family that were way up to no good. And, he would look the other way on lots of things, but not when it came to raping children, not when it came to raping 7-year-old children. You know, uh, there's a line. I think we should draw a line a lot closer to home. I don't think we should tolerate as much as we do because so many people get hurt, and they're never satisfied. These criminal syndicates are never satisfied. They're not just satisfied with selling illegal drugs. They're not just satisfied with human trafficking. And human trafficking for the most part is almost all females. So, almost all females. And they're not satisfied with that. They'll go to the child sex trafficking. And then they're not satisfied with that. They'll go to the weapons and the equipment sales. And then they'll do, so it's everything. And then they'll go to the bullying if you get called out. What do you mean you're calling me out? And then you're the evil one. Like I'm calling out Anthony Swafford. I'm calling out Leilani Hart. I'm calling out Tavita Nusa. And, what they did was so criminal. I'm calling out Soto. We're calling out Soto. What he did was criminal. And there is a conflict of interest. And I'm calling out Vanity Fair Veronica Escobar. Because it's clearly she has the power. We've given her everything. She's part of this $1 trillion mess we've created, and call it, democracy or a republic. And where is she? What has she done? And then you have Russia putting out an arrest order on our Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham. And, he's just a warmonger. And he sends this man that calls him a coward. He sends a man to speak for him that calls him a coward to say he's not going to address Richard Halliday at all. And then he wants to send our sons and daughters to war. But, when you need him, he's not there. He doesn't have your 6. He doesn't have your most valuable asset 6. That's for sure. Yeah, he needs to be stripped from his seat and investigated, I'm sure. Audited, I'm sure. And it's this is why I wanted to talk to you about the conspiracy to forcibly disappear someone and murder someone. I definitely wanted to talk about that because if we're going to be doing all of those other crimes, that is not something crazy. That's not something that you have to say, no, that can't happen. Look at what's happening. It's absolutely possible. And I'm going to tell you it's more than possible because we have hard evidence. We have hard facts. We have forensic evidence that all of this happened. And, the conspiracy, I have some notes here, the conspiracy of forced disappearance and murder refers to a situation where individuals or a group of people plan and carry out the abduction and subsequent killing of someone, often with the intention of hiding the evidence and avoiding detection or accountability for their actions. Doesn't that sound like Richard Halliday's case? Absolutely, this is a group effort. Absolutely, they're trying to avoid detection. Absolutely, they are trying to hide evidence. Give us Richard's remains. Shh, shh, he's dead. Shh, what is that? What is that? And also, they have interfered in the investigation, not just on the USA side, but also in the Mexican side. They've interfered on the Mexican side in Mexico. What is a conspiracy? A conspiracy involves two or more people working together to plan and execute an illegal act. In this case, the individuals involved would conspire to forcibly make someone disappear and then commit murder. I'm telling you, we have that definitely in this case. And it's interesting. Let's go back to that yellow Interpol where Richard is not charged with anything, not even nothing. He is just yellow. He's just missing, right? And then we, get this information that it's designated died while missing. What is that? And then we get the archives just this last few days, and we're reading through it. And Richard has been promoted. But don't forget Anthony Swafford. Now, Anthony Swafford is really feeling bad, I hope. I hope he's feeling really bad because Richard just has been promoted twice in December and 4 months later in April. How long did it take you to get promoted? Did it take you 4 months in between promotions? I mean, they just promoted Richard twice. And then they extended his enlistment until the year 2026. Now that must have legal ramifications, and I can imagine some of the legal ramifications that has, why they did that. But this is a soldier that Captain Park had no nice words for, that Colonel Dauber had no nice words for, that Lieutenant Colonel Roddick had no nice words for, that Major General Clem Coward had no nice words for, and they colluded and conspired together, more than one people working together. They worked together to retaliate against Richard unjustly, and I would say illegally. And maybe that's why Roddick lost his command for loss of confidence, and why Major General Clem Coward lost his command for loss of confidence. It's interesting, the timing of it all. And it's interesting that their words didn't have a date. And they're just projecting, because let me tell you, they have put Clem Coward, and I know something about him too that was dangerous. Absolutely unbecoming of an officer and dangerous. I have that on record. And a bunch of people were talking to me about Dauber at the beginning of this, and I'm like, okay, wow, so much information coming in, and you have to process it. My dad is really sick and needs us, and Yeah. Of course, with Lieutenant Colonel Roddick, bad stuff coming in. I have screenshots and screenshots. Nobody was, saying, "Oh, he's a great guy." That's for sure. He was up to no good. So they're just projecting in their foul reports of retaliation. Why? What was Richard pulling on when he was a whistleblower? What was he exposing in that unit? And that's why we need to make this complaint of conspiracy to forcibly disappear and murder Richard, the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier. Very clear. What is murder? Murder refers to the intentional killing of another person. In the context of a forced disappearance conspiracy, the victim is abducted and subsequently murdered by the perpetrators. The motives of the murder could vary, including silencing the victim, eliminating a perceived threat, and carrying out a premeditated act of violence. I absolutely believe that Richard was murdered. I believe it. I believe they did this. And I believe they try to hide the body. And I think they try to manipulate the body. I try to make it identifiable. And I believe that the cover up and hiding evidence after the forced disappearance and murder, the conspirators would typically attempt to cover up their actions by disposing of the victim's body, tampering with evidence, or creating false narratives to mislead investigators and conceal their involvement. This is done to evade detection and avoid legal consequences. And absolutely, there has been a cover up. Absolutely. We have hard facts. We have forensic evidence that backs all of these claims up. So why not? Why not put in a complaint for the conspiracy for forced disappearance and murder of Richard Halliday? We just have to add a name, right? There's so many. There's so many. I'll take some questions now. Tiffany, thank you so much. I think you said there have been beheadings within the military. Yes, so in April, Vanessa Guillen was beheaded. She was bludgeoned with a hammer in the arms room. And it was so brutal that even when they tried to identify her with dental records, they couldn't do it. I don't know how they cleaned up that room, and I don't know how she got into the Pelican case. But somehow they took her lifeless body and they manipulated and contorted her or whatever into a Pelican case, which is a military trunk. It's a plastic military trunk. And they, I guess, cleaned up that arms room. I just can't even imagine. And the CID's like, we didn't know it had happened. We didn't know. You know, they're just, her car keys were there, her wallet, her phone was there in that arms room. Anyway, so they put her in the back of their vehicle and drove out to the Leon River, where, and I think they made stops because they picked up concrete and they picked up lime. They must have picked up a shovel. They picked up some large knife, and they proceeded to cut her in pieces and try to burn her body. and maybe they just burned the body, uh, the pieces, just to try to evade the body being found. Like what we believe what happened to Richard is that they tried to manipulate the remains, just like this lady over in Juarez. They blended her body. They cut her up and try to put her in the blender. In the middle of all that, they got caught. Um, and with Richard, they try to make the body unidentifiable. Um, and that's what they did to Vanessa Guillen. And they then dug a foxhole and put her in her body parts in a foxhole altogether. See, with Richard, our reports that we have gotten is that they learned from the Vanessa Guillen, uh, because animals did end up finding and the remains. And they went to the greatest extent for animals not to, because they poured lime over her, and then they poured concrete over her, and then dirt and leaves and everything, and the animals still smelled her. Um, so with Richard, I get, this is the reports we're getting, is they dismembered him, and they put his body parts in different locations. And our reports right now are three. We believe there are four locations. The three that we believe that we have, and we have evidence for, is Red Rio Range, um, which is a training area north of, right there south of White Sands. And then area 244, which is the Kamal Jabbar Afghan training, mock training town, village, and that's on Fort Bliss. And then the third one, well, which was the second one that remains were found, we believe, um, is at kilometer 29 to 30. It's in between there. We even have the location, um, and you know then we have Enrique Roman Martinez, who was beheaded from Fort Bragg. His head rolled ashore, washed ashore. Um, I believe that there has been no reports of any other parts of his body being found. Um, and he's been put into a cold case, which I think is an outrage. It's a total outrage, um, because they just quietly went through that whole thing with Enrique, and yeah. And then of course you have Austin Hawk, who was brutally. He was Austin Hawk's case is really should outrage everybody. Everybody. I mean, all of them should outrage us, right? But he was a whistleblower, and he was exposed, and he was not protected. He was denied his whistleblower protection. He was getting threats. He reported that he was getting threats, and the CQ was in on this and colluded for weeks with the murderer and let the murderer back on. He was the former sergeant, and he proceeded to murder Austin Hawk in his room. It was so brutal. I know lots of things about it, but I can just tell you this, that when they went to go pick him up, they said they had a hold on his head because his head was falling off. So those are the three beheadings that I was talking about. Yeah. And it did not get reported. I mean, it should have been three beheading 1 month after another, April, May, June of 2020. Everything was COVID, 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 COVID. COVID, and we're having our service members brutally murdered. Um, yeah, it really has outraged um, many people. Thank you, Patty, for coming on. Thank you, Danielle. Everybody on this page should stop what we are doing tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'm in New York, and pray that Richard is found and brought home. Strength in numbers. Thank you so much, Patty. That's such a good idea. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., I'll come on and I'll say a prayer. I'm going to have to put on my timer and make sure I stop at 5:45 and come on and say a prayer at. I have Richard's vigil right beside me. And, you know, I thought the vigil that we had, the prayers that we had for him were so awesome. And God's hand has been on this from the very beginning. We would have never found out that Nadal Baim was the father-in-law of Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM, which was Richard's command, that went into the Dollar General and said that he was with the FBI, which we believe he is. We believe he's an FBI informant. And that, he said to the cashier, the FBI has found Richard and he's dead. Shh. And they're looking for him in 5 different places. And the cashier's like, well, that confuses me. Well, it doesn't confuse you now. That happened the 26th of October. It doesn't confuse you now because we know that we have reports that Richard was dismembered and that his body parts were put in many different locations. And so that makes sense now, right? At that time, it was confusing. Thank you so much. Oh, I better hold on, y'all. My battery's running out. Like, why can't I see it? Oh, yeah, it was at 5%. So, a 14-year-old girl allegedly was found living in the barracks with a soldier at Fort Bliss recently. Wow, Danielle, you and I, that is, you have to be very careful how you say things. I said, I might be wrong, but tell me if I'm wrong. But that's exactly, if you're hearing it, I'm hearing it. She was in the barracks. Can you believe that? Allegedly. How does a security get breached like that? That is a security breach. Okay? How did that soldier get clearance for that? And thank you for the YouTube for that. Yeah, that is, wow. It's a wowzer. And I came on very, very late. I know. I'm trying to get on earlier, but there's so much to do behind the scenes. And I just want to let you know that we've been looking into this conspiracy to forcibly disappear and murder Richard Halliday. And so we're getting that all together. And just pray about that. Pray about that because, we still have $150,000 reward for anyone that comes forward with information that leads to finding Richard, right? That breaks this case open. We still have that. And we have people on the list that have helped us so much, like the cashier there at the Dollar General. There's many people on that list, but I just want to say, we haven't forgotten anybody that has helped us. And we have been very transparent, and you can prove anything with us because I'm on here talking every day. So you can send me old videos and say, don't you remember when you said this? Um, so yeah, and that is a little bit risky because people can say, why did you say that? So I've been trying to be very, very careful. And, um, but at the same time, you have to uh, call out those who have committed these violent, violent crimes and be willing to get these violent and vulgar messages sent to you. And I do. Um, but those people, um, if they're watching constantly and they're sending violent, vulgar messages to a mother that's at, looking for their missing soldier son, something is not right, something is not right in that area. And so that's why we trace them. That's why we um, know that they're coming on with fake names and things like that. But there's other ways of determining who they are, right? There's other ways. And it's called forensic methods or forensic science, right? And with that, we have gotten forensic evidence. So this is, and especially in this day and age with the voice, there's so many different ways of identifying a person. And, you know, so I think it's time, and we have been already with Soto, with the sheriff's department there. We're still working on that one, but so you don't have a warrant for Richard. You have a yellow Interpol. You have him being promoted. You have his enlistment being extended. Um, you know, tell me what you think about that. He's a yellow Interpol. You have him being promoted. What they have said about Richard, I have not repeated, but it has been such a smear job. They know that it's fake, you see, because they promoted him. They know it's fake because he was a yellow Interpol. And yet, they're still listening and following some person that's saying, do not follow normal protocol when it comes to looking for a missing soldier, a presumed murdered soldier. Like, you could fence in all these phones, like Lalani's phone, Dallas Hart's phone, Tavita Noosa's phone. Where were their phones pinging on the 23rd and 24th of July 2020? Where was Soto's phone pinging on the 23rd and 24th of 2020, July 2020, right? Um, and there's others, and there's others. So they have the methods, and so we just need to truly have that. We've only had a botched investigation, and ignore Richard Halliday type investigation, right? It's been a non-investigation, a mock investigation, a staged investigation, that nothing was done. There was no op org. There was no one in uniform. Um, you know, that was very clear at the task force Find Richard Halliday, where they showed up with no uniform on, and no op org, and no team leader, and nothing got done. And we called El Paso police. Rob did, and they go, sir, we haven't gotten any requests from CID. We haven't heard anything from them since you left. So someone has access. Lonnie Hart had access to the CID. There was a conflict of interest. She had power in the CID. She might have power. She didn't have dominion, though. So it's It's definitely to us, we have enough now. We have enough, and we've had enough for a while. We've had it all, but we are ready now to absolutely put in um, a complaint about the conspiracy to involving the forced disappearance and murder of our son, Richard Halliday, the Vanessa Guillen first absent soldier. And with that, be sure to join moms if you are a mother of a missing, murdered, and maligned soldier. If you are a family member, you could be a dad. We just called it moms. And please join that. And if you have things that you want to contribute, tips that you want to contribute, let me know, because we could use all the help we can get, all the brain power, all the people that have experiences and education in different fields that we don't have, that will help the parents of the missing, murdered, and maligned soldiers. That would really, really help. Also, write those letters. Write those letters now more than ever, to investigate the disappearance of Richard Halliday, the disappearance and presumed murder of Richard Halliday. I want to say the murder of Richard Halliday, but, got to walk that fine line. So thank you so much. God bless you, and see you tomorrow. I'm going to try to come on here at 6 o'clock. Um, Maybe just do my phone. It's really quick, and go do a live then. All right, everyone. God bless you. Bye bye.